To Matthew Shimura, our grand prize winner, and to all the Student Cam winners and competitors this year. Thanks for all your hard work. We'll have the next competition announced soon, and it begins in the fall. Right now to the House of Representatives for live coverage of today's session.
God of mercy and of kindness, God of patience and of action, God of understanding and forgiveness, we give you thanks for this new day of what is and what is to become. We pray that you help us draw closer to you, that we may bear witness to your presence among us and face the day with courage and confidence. Send your Spirit upon the members of this assembly. May your grace descend upon them as they meet the difficult task of working for the common good. May they be blessed with wisdom and compassion, enough to serve their fellow citizens with dignity and humility. Provide them with the strength to be faithful to their duties and to serve honorably, always remembering the sacred trust that they have with their fellow citizens. May all that is done this day be for your greater glory and honor. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. Pledge of allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Barletta.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair will entertain up to 5 one-minute requests on each side. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise? The gentleman asks unanimous consent to address the House. Does the gentleman ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute? So ordered.
Mr. Speaker, in a minute or so I'm speaking this morning. 2 more illegal aliens will be added to America's population. Maybe they'll climb over a fence, maybe they'll sneak off a boat, maybe they'll overstay an expired visa. All expect to find a better life here in the United States, but all are breaking the law. The millions of illegal aliens in this country right now impose a huge burden on America's cities. One of them was my city, Hazleton, Pennsylvania. That's why, as mayor, I was the first in the country to enact a local law cracking down on illegal immigration. Now other municipalities and states have taken up that fight. Seeing Arizona defend its law this week, I'm reminded how the federal government has failed to stop illegal immigration. States like Arizona and cities like Hazleton are forced to act because this administration and prior administrations refused to enforce immigration laws. On Wednesday, Chief Justice John Roberts said it best, quote, "It seems to me that the federal government just doesn't want to know who is here illegally or not." Well, Mr. Speaker, take it from someone who's been fighting against illegal immigration for 6 years now. Sadly, that sounds just about right. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it's with sadness that I rise to honor the life of Otis Brock III, who passed away Tuesday at the age of 41. Otis's time with us was too brief, but his life serves as a shining example of service to others. A leader from the beginning, Otis was inspired by the example set by his parents, Otis J. Brock and Annette K. Brock, both prominent educators. After graduating from Saul C. Johnson High School and Savannah State University, Otis rose to become the Savannah-Chatham County Public School System's operations chief. Otis served in many civic capacities, but the accomplishment he took the most pride in was the role of father. Otis and his wife Nyla are the proud parents of 2 young daughters, Zuri and Zoe, and are awaiting the birth of their 3rd child. Otis, we thank you for your life and legacy. You will be missed. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize John Allen and his lifetime of service to his community and to the state of Arkansas and to our country. John currently serves on the Board of Directors for the Lawrence County Children's Shelter and Northeast Arkansas Public Water Authority. In the past, he served as an alderman of Hoxie, chairman of the Lawrence County Chamber, president of the Walnut Ridge Jaycees, a lay leader at Hoxie United Methodist Church, and as president of the Walnut Ridge Lions Club. In the 1980s, John served on the Arkansas Transportation Commission and the National Motor Safety Regulatory Review Panel. During this time, he was instrumental in obtaining funding for Arkansas State University to start a transportation-related program with the College of Business. Thanks to John's efforts, ASU now has a logistics and supply chain management program. Additionally, John served as director of the Arkansas Assessment Coordination Department and Arkansas State Director for USDA Rural Development. John has achieved much as a public servant, but he'll be the first to say that his family is the center of his life. John and Elaine Allen have been married for 49 years. Together they have 3 children, Andy, Andrea, and Matt. John is also the proud grandfather of Anna, Hayden, and Ella. Mr. Speaker, today I honor John Allen for his lifetime of service. Arkansas, and indeed our nation, is a better place to live because of John's efforts.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and ask permission of advising consent.
Gentleman asks for unanimous consent.
Thank you very much.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in opposition of H.R. 4628, known as the Interest Rate Reduction Act. Keeping student loans rates at a current level should be an easy, bipartisan bill. However, it should not be at the cost of an assault on women's health. Of all the offsets available to the majority, they chose to undermine the well-being of Americans' women and children by gutting investments in screening for breast and cervical cancer, in childhood immunizations, in initiatives to reduce birth defects. I remain committed to preventing an increase in student costs for over 7.4 million Americans. I'd like to see a new bipartisan bill sent to the President's desk well in advance of July 1st deadline, when the rates are scheduled to go up. But any student loan relief should not come at the expense of funding for childhood immunizations, screening programs for breast and cervical cancer, and birth defects. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this flawed legislation.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Thomas C. Detweiler, a constituent and a friend from Ridgeway, Pennsylvania. Tom is the mill manager of Domtar's Johnsonburg Mill, and earlier this week he was awarded the prestigious Mill Manager of the Year Award from the Paper Industry Management Association at their international conference. Tom was named Vice President Mill Manager on July 1st, 2006, which is the pinnacle of a professional journey that began over 38 years ago at the same facility when he was hired as a process engineer. Over the years, Tom has become a recognized leader in the industry. His work and dedication is an inspiration to all of us, and his concern for the mill and employees over the years is truly commendable. While being diagnosed with a severe health issue that began almost 6 years ago, Tom is devoted to the Johnsonburg area, the mill, and especially the 378 employees. A native of Johnsonburg and 1970 graduate of Johnsonburg High School, Tom holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Medical Technology from Penn State University. Tom resides in Ridgeway, Pennsylvania with his wife, Kathy. They have 2 grown daughters, Lauren and Lynn, who reside in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I want to thank Tom for his service to the community and congratulate him on this esteemed award. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, when the doorbell rang at 5 a.m., Kimberly Metcalf of Boynton Beach, Florida, knew her worst fear had come true. Her only child, 22-year-old Michael Metcalf, U.S. Army Private First Class, died in Afghanistan on Sunday following an IED attack. Michael was killed while at the wheel of his armored vehicle that was going to rescue other soldiers that had been struck by a roadside bomb. Described by his mother as tough and strong with a sensitive side, that he performed this one last act of bravery came as no surprise to all who knew him. Michael attended Park Vista High School and graduated from St. John's Northwestern Military Academy. He loved surfing, skimboarding, and spending time by the water. On Monday, Michael's friends and family gathered at the inlet to light candles on his surfboard. Winds blew out all but one. As his friend said, the candle wouldn't go out. He wanted to hang out with us all night. We will never forget Michael Metcalf's sacrifice, and our nation is forever grateful for his service.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, most people can point to at least 1 or 2 leaders, historical figures, or personal mentors who significantly affected their lives or callings. Chuck Colson was all three of these things to me and to many, many others. Charles W. Colson went to be with his Lord on April 21st, 2012. Chuck Colson was a profound example of someone saved by grace. As a state legislator, I was truly grieved by our state's sky-high recidivism rates and got involved with several prison ministries, including Koinonia House, which was founded by yet another man whose life was turned around after he converted in prison and met Charles Colson. Then a year before I ran for Congress, I was part of Chuck Colson's fantastic discipleship program. My wife and I chose to name our youngest son Colson. I pray for my Cole that his life, like Chuck Colson's, would reflect the life-changing grace and redemption offered to us by the cross. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and advise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in recognition of National Crime Victims' Rights Week. As co-founder and co-chair with Congressman Ted Poe of the Bipartisan Congressional Victims' Rights Caucus, we are well aware far too often that the victims of crime suffer in silence. Just last week, members of the caucus honored advocates nationwide for their work in supporting crime victims, including the University of California at Merced, Candy O'Donnell Brown of the Mountain Services Center, and the good work that she and her folks have done. Every day, these advocates work tirelessly to guarantee that every survivor has a place to turn for support in the aftermath of crime. Though we wish that commemorative weeks such as this were not necessary, they help educate the public and remind survivors that they are not and never will be forgotten. All of us have a responsibility to give voice to the challenges crime victims face, not just this week, but for every week of the year. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute and advise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And I rise today with a heavy heart as the delivery ceremony of the last F-22 Raptor will take place next Wednesday in Marietta, Georgia, my hometown. Tail number 195, far short of what our Air Force needs. Over the last 3 decades, the Cobb County community has watched the F-22 grace the skies as thousands of our citizens have worked steadfastly to make the Marietta production a model line. Many of our neighbors have indeed had a direct hand in producing the most capable fighter jet in history. The program has been a critical component of America's industrial base and a source of economic strength, creating 25,000 American jobs in 44 states and representing more than $12 billion in annual economic activity. The F-22 protects our citizens and our soldiers and deters Americans' enemies. Its legacy will be a credit to our community for years to come. Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues join me in recognizing Lockheed Martin and the F-22 program, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on Workers' Memorial Day because 25 years ago in Bridgeport, Connecticut at L'Ambiance Plaza, 28 construction workers lost their lives building a building using the controversial lift slab construction technique, which even at the time was subject to controversy and is now subject to very significant regulation. This sad accident could easily have been avoided, but because the proper safety regulations were not in place, 28 men did not go home that day. When I attended a ceremony earlier this week to commemorate L'Ambiance, I met with some of the families. The men were husbands, fathers, brothers, and neighbors. Day in and day out in this chamber, we hear about job-killing regulations from the other side. And yes, we must make sure that our regulations are finely balanced. But it has become religious in this chamber that all regulations, whether they are there to preserve the lives of construction workers or to keep children from dying of asthma, are job-killing regulations. If this stays this ideological and this religious, we will see more killing of the real kind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote of the yeas and nays are ordered. or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Record votes on postponed questions will be taken later today. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 2096, the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2012 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2096, a bill to advance cybersecurity research, development, and technical standards, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, and the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material in this bill as amended, now under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for such time as he may consume.
Mr. Speaker, today Congress has a historic opportunity to lay the groundwork to defend our nation against cyber attacks. And we're not just talking about mischievous online activity, but actions that could bring America to its knees. Unfortunately, this is not science fiction. America is under attack, not by armies advancing on our beaches or planes overhead, but in the virtual world where those who intend to do us harm have already penetrated our federal and private computer networks and continue to plot relentlessly to bring down our critical infrastructure. Our water supply, nuclear facilities, air traffic control systems, electrical grid, and defense and banking systems are all vulnerable to a crippling attack. General Keith Alexander, director of the National Security Agency, said it is not a matter of if, but when a cyber Pearl Harbor occurs. We are just simply fortunate that a computer-based attack has not yet brought physical harm to Americans. But that is not for lack of trying. China has already successfully stolen some of our biggest military secrets, such as information about the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the Department of Defense's biggest weapons program ever. Now they know the program well enough not only to copy it, but to guard against it. Similar attacks continue unabated on our military's computer systems. Hackers trick soldiers into downloading viruses onto their computers, after which every keystroke is recorded. Mr. Speaker, our military secrets are being stolen every day. Imagine if agents of a foreign government were breaking into the Pentagon and stealing top-secret documents, paper files. It would not be tolerated. It would be all over the front page of the Washington Post. And yet in the virtual world, that is occurring. In fact, an October 2011 report to Congress on foreign economic collection and industrial espionage states that it is part of China and Russia's national policy to try to identify and take sensitive technology which they need for their own development. In fact, they train and have a cyber warfare college. The degradation of our national security and intellectual property from cyber theft threatens to weaken us where we have historically been strong. The NSA calculates that Russia and China have stolen $1 trillion in American intellectual property, the biggest transfer of wealth in history. Their philosophy is why invent when you can steal it. And beside nation states, there are groups such as Anonymous, LulzSec, and AntiSec who indulge in non-state hacktivism. Their agenda is to bully, embarrass, and steal from those that they disagree with philosophically or politically. They think nothing of closing down websites, hacking into email and voicemails, taking sensitive information from those who don't do their bidding. There's been a lot of hard work going into this week, this Cyber Week, and a lot of thought to find solutions. As co-chair of the Center for Strategic and International Studies Commission on Cybersecurity for the 44th President, I helped draft recommendations for securing the country's government networks and critical infrastructures. As a member of the Speaker's Cyber Task Force and chairman of the House Cybersecurity Caucus, I helped present those recommendations to Congress and the legislation we have seen this week. The historic legislation the House votes on this week incorporates many of these recommendations. This bill, the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act, gives the National Institute of Standards and Technology the authority to set security standards for federal computer systems and develop checklists for agencies to follow. Why is that important? It hardens our federal networks. Every federal agency has been hacked into by agents of a foreign power, by hacktivists. Every federal agency, including the Pentagon, has been hacked into. This bill will harden those federal networks and make them less vulnerable to such an attack. It also creates a federal university private sector task force to coordinate research and development. It establishes cybersecurity research and development grant programs and improves the quality of our cyber workforce by creating a scholarship program. Importantly, it creates an education and awareness program for computer hygiene. When you talk to the NSA, they tell you that computer hygiene accounts for the majority of cyber attacks. This would remedy the majority of vulnerabilities that we face. And finally, it sets forth procurement standards for hardware and software that will minimize security risks. This will also have a ripple effect in the private sector so that they will also adopt such procurement standards. Other legislation we saw that passed yesterday facilitates the sharing of information, of threat information, between the public and private sector, which controls most of our critical infrastructure. While it's not part of this bill, I think it's important to make the analogy that what we did yesterday was simply allow the federal government to share signature threat information with the private sector, similar to a police officer sharing with a homeowner a threat that they see of someone breaking into their house and then telling them how they can better protect their house and lock the door without the door being opened. These common sense reforms are a baseline of what we need to secure our infrastructure. We must take action before life is lost and our economy and defenses have been weakened to the point of damaging our country. One of the biggest failures after 9/11 was the knowledge that the attacks could have possibly been prevented with better intelligence, information sharing, and protective measures. It was also a lack of imagination. And while we can't change the past, we can use it as a lesson as we go forward in our modern cyber world, a world in which our water supply, defense systems, nuclear power plants, electrical grid, banking systems, FAA, and other critical infrastructures are vulnerable to cyber thieves, attacks, and terrorists. We know what has to be done. Mr. Speaker, the time to act is now. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized for such time as he may consume.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 2096, the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act. I'd like to first thank my colleague, Mr. McCall, for his hard work on this critical piece of national cybersecurity policy. As co-founder of the House Cybersecurity Caucus, Mr. McCall has played a key role in this policy area that is becoming increasingly important to our nation. Our work together on this legislation, which began last Congress, demonstrates that this bill is good, bipartisan public policy that should once again receive overwhelming support in this House. In 2009, the President called for a comprehensive 60-day review of U.S. cyberspace policy. That call and the subsequent expert recommendations contained in the report led to a series of hearings on cybersecurity R&D and resulted in the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2010, which I sponsored and worked on with Mr. McCall in the Science and Technology Committee in the last Congress. That bill passed this chamber by a vote of 422 to 5. Unfortunately, it was not taken up by the Senate. Since that time, cyber threats have only increased. So last May, Mr. McCall and I introduced this bill once again to address the pressing education, research and development, and standards and practices aspects of cybersecurity. In America, every individual and every organization, including the federal government, is vulnerable to cybercrime. Our most sensitive data are stored on computers. And around the world, there are countless individuals, groups, and nations relentlessly focused on exploiting gaps in our cybersecurity system. The Federal Trade Commission estimates that identity theft costs consumers about $50 billion annually. The Department of Commerce was targeted this month in a cyber attack that required the Economic Development Administration to completely unplug from the network. And just yesterday, the Homeland Security Committee heard from witnesses about Iran's development of a cyber army. Cybercrime evolves as quickly as technology itself. Thus, it will take a collective effort by the federal government, the private sector, our scientists and engineers, and every American to defeat it. And H.R. 2096 will help to do this. The first step is education. This bill builds on existing partnerships, such as the NSF-sponsored Center for System Security and Information Assurance at Moraine Valley Community College in Palos Hills, Illinois. This community college has trained hundreds of teachers and college faculty in cybersecurity-related areas since 2003. Individuals who are now teaching at colleges and technical training programs nationwide. H.R. 2096 also provides scholarships to students pursuing degrees in cybersecurity in exchange for their service in the federal IT workforce. This approach not only provides for the immediate workforce needs of the federal government, but it also builds a pipeline for private industry. Now, in addition to skilled IT workforce, our nation also needs advances in basic R&D. Cyber threats are constantly evolving, and cybersecurity R&D must reflect a comprehensive effort that builds towards a more secure foundation in the short and long terms. So this legislation requires relevant federal agencies to work with the National Science and Technology Council to develop a national strategic plan for cybersecurity R&D that sets priorities based on risk assessments, focuses on transformational technologies, and strengthens technology transfer programs. It will build on infrastructure that we need to get the best ideas out of the lab and into the marketplace. And because people are perhaps the weakest link in many IT systems, the research strategy will include the social sciences to help us better understand how humans interact with technology. Promoting public awareness of good computer hygiene can go a long way to protecting our systems. Dissemination of simple concepts, such as installing antivirus software and not opening emails from unknown sources, can go a long way in reducing the threat of cybercrime. The legislation also calls on the National Institute of Standards and Technology to be a leader in both domestic and international cybersecurity standards. As Mr. McCall said in H.R. 2096, tasked NIST with developing a comprehensive international cybersecurity strategy that defines what working in IT technical standards we need, determines where they're being developed, and ensures the United States is represented. And finally, in recognition of the federal government's increasing efforts to utilize remote data centers known as cloud computing, in this Congress, I worked to add language so that the bill now directs NIST to work with other agencies and with experts in the private sector to ensure that consistent and secure standards on cloud computing are put in place across the federal government. As cloud computing is used more and more by the federal government, we must make sure that this data is safe. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a necessary and vitally important step towards securing our public, private, and personal IT systems. It is a good bipartisan bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to yield to my good friend and colleague, the chairman of the Science and Technology Committee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall, for 3 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. And I want to thank my fellow Texan Representative Michael McCall for his very capable leadership, for his wonderful opening statement. It allows me to expect less time. His knowledge of cybersecurity issues is a very important asset to this Congress and is a benefit to the nation. And I'm pleased to join him as a co-sponsor of H.R. 2096, the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act of 2012. And as he stated so eloquently, as our reliance on information technology expands, so do our vulnerabilities. Protecting the nation's cyber infrastructure is a responsibility shared by a number of different federal agencies, including the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. H.R. 2096 primarily addresses important cybersecurity research and development efforts conducted at or led by these agencies. It reauthorizes existing but expired research and education programs at NSF while eliminating 2 unnecessary programs and enhances scholarships to increase the size and skills of the federal cybersecurity workforce. It strengthens the cybersecurity R&D, standards development and coordination, and education and awareness at NIST, and it provides for strategic planning for cybersecurity R&D across the federal government. This is a good, fiscally responsible bill that enjoys broad bipartisan support. It represents a modest but critical piece of Congress's overall efforts to address the comprehensive cybersecurity needs of the United States. This bill has the support of numerous organizations, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which calls H.R. 2096, quote, an important step toward improving federal cybersecurity R&D activities to improve the security, reliability, and resilience of America's digital infrastructure in partnership with industry, unquote. And I support the passage of H.R. 2096 and encourage my colleagues to do the same. And I thank you again. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
I'd like to yield to the gentleman from Rhode Island 5 minutes.
The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 5 minutes. Without objection.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today in strong support of the Cybersecurity Enhancement Act offered by my good friend and colleague, the co-chair of the Cybersecurity Caucus, Mr. McCall. The gentleman and I have been at this issue for several years now, and when we first began the effort back in 06 or 07, I think for the most part, most people, when we talked about cybersecurity, it was cyber what? And oh, how things have changed. I think we certainly collectively, between he and I and many others, have raised the awareness of this issue and its importance and the challenges that we face in securing our nation in cyberspace, and I deeply am grateful for his efforts. It is impossible to overstate the importance of the cyber domain to our national security, our infrastructure, and our economic competitiveness. Clearly, we all recognize how much we use the Internet every day in our daily lives, whether it's for commerce, communication, social networking, or national security issues. It really has become a part of our daily lives. But in securing the cyber domain, we also face immense challenges. Cyber threats are clearly growing, more numerous, sophisticated, and successful. We all know of someone who perhaps has had their bank accounts hacked and had money stolen, or their identity stolen, or their credit card number or social security number stolen because of a cyber attack on a company or government institution. We also have heard numerous attacks, and we see them daily on the area of cyber espionage, and the gentleman from Texas did a great job in outlining some of the specific challenges. The F-35 is one case in particular that comes to mind. There are billions of dollars in R&D that is stolen on a daily or weekly basis by our adversaries. And of course, we have heard and have documented numerous issues of cyber attack. Thankfully, nothing major yet in this country, but as General Alexander, the director of the NSA, has outlined, these days perhaps would come, and we need to do all we can to avoid them. And well-intentioned technological changes that create great efficiencies through automation and advanced management techniques, of course, can leave us even more vulnerable to cyber exploitation. Clearly, these efficiencies that have been brought through automation have helped us to be much more efficient, but as the test from Idaho National Labs, which showed how easy it would be to conduct a skater attack that penetrated systems that are governed safety systems on pumps and valves and generators, could easily be penetrated and cause that generator to blow itself up. So these things can happen, and we need to do all we can to avoid them, make sure that that day never comes. Now, obviously, we have to tap into our creative and innovative spirit to address today's challenges and position ourselves to be agile in the face of tomorrow's threats. I'm pleased that this bill helps us to make this need a reality by strengthening the coordination and cooperation among the various cyber research and development efforts across the federal government. The fruits of that research will be critical to our nation's future defense in the cyber domain. Additionally, I'm pleased to highlight that this bill enhances programs that increase the size and skills of our nation's cybersecurity workforce. Now, we have obviously a critical shortage of qualified cyber experts, and we need to address that need. The director of the CIA's Clandestine Information Technology Office estimates that we only have about 1,000 people that can operate in the country at world-class levels in cyberspace. And what he says is we need somewhere between 20 and 30,000 people. We've also heard about the skills gap that we face in this country, where particularly in high-tech companies are having a real difficult time finding qualified workers to fill those jobs of the 21st century. We need to do better in closing our skills gap. Well, to this end, last year in the National Defense Authorization Act commissioned a study that the Pentagon had to conduct to determine its cyber workforce needs and give them better situational awareness about who they have with those capabilities and what the needs will be both now and in the future. There was a successful study, and the Pentagon is putting that plan and that information into action to close that gap. And at the high school level in Rhode Island and several other states, we've working with the SANS Institute, created the Cyber Challenge. We need to focus on our young people and get them focused on a potential career in cybersecurity, and that program has been incredibly successful. So in closing that gap and developing our cyber workforce, this legislation is an important step in that effort. So I want to thank the gentleman from Texas for his leadership on this issue, and I'm pleased to support this bipartisan legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just, a point of personal privilege, say, give my thanks to the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin, my good friend, colleague, co-chair of the Cybersecurity Caucus, for your vision, your leadership on this very, very important issue, as you and I know. We were into this issue of cybersecurity 6 years ago before it was really cool to be into cybersecurity, and so thank you so much for your leadership. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Texas, my good friend and colleague, and also the chairman of the Speaker's Cybersecurity Caucus, Mr. Thornberry, for 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I appreciate the chairman of the Science Committee, Mr. Hall, and the ranking member, Ms. Johnson, for bringing this bill and the next bill to the floor. This will mean the House will have passed 4 bills this week related to cybersecurity, taking important steps in the right direction. And I particularly appreciate the work of the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, and Mr. Lipinski, for bringing this bill to the floor. As they have said, they've been working on it for a while, and I appreciate their persistence and also the substance of the bill. Of course, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, as you've heard, has been working in this area for a number of years, and the study that he co-chaired with Mr. Langevin with the CSIS Commission on Cybersecurity remains one of the leading studies in this field. Mr. Speaker, this bill is important. You've heard about the education and awareness. It also helps make sure that the research and development is coordinated so that we don't duplicate within the federal government, but also that it is complementary to what the private sector is doing. Because I think it's important to emphasize that the answer to cybersecurity is not a government program, it is our people and innovation. That is really the key. And so others may steal information from us. They may even copy some of the things they steal. But what they can't do is produce the sort of innovation and new approaches that are absolutely essential to our future. That's part of the reason this bill is important. It's part of the reason we have to be careful about new regulations and other things that some people want to do, because nurturing the innovation that comes from this country of the private sector and the government is absolutely essential to our future. So I appreciate all of the work that the gentleman from Texas and others have done, not only on this bill, but in the larger scheme of things as it cuts across a number of committees. It takes our country a few steps in the right direction, but it's important that we take those steps and for our future security.
Time has expired. Gentleman from Illinois.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as you may consume to General Lady from Texas, the ranking member of the committee, Ms. Johnson.
Gentle Lady from Texas is recognized for such time as she may consume.
Thank you very much, and let me express my appreciation to the leaders on this bill. This is a good bipartisan bill, and it is nearly identical to the legislation that passed the House by an overwhelming majority last Congress. And I'd like to certainly cite Mr. Lipinski and Mr. McCall for their leadership and work on this bill. The Internet and our access to Internet through computers, tablets, smartphones, etc., has greatly increased our productivity and our connectivity. Unfortunately, this connectivity and the dependence on our infrastructure, our commerce, and a great deal of our day-to-day lives on information technologies have increased our vulnerability to cyber attack. For example, you may recall last year the networks of 48 companies were penetrated for at least 6 months by a hacker and who was looking for intellectual property to steal. And it was reported that the personal information of nearly 80 million video game users was compromised. So we need to do what we can to help ensure that these sorts of intrusions are minimized, and that to do this we need to build a strong partnership between our federal agencies, businesses, non-governmental organizations, and educational institutions. So I'm pleased that H.R. 2096 strengthens the public-private partnerships, guarantees a proactive and comprehensive federal cybersecurity R&D portfolio, trains the next generation of cybersecurity professionals, and ensures the development of robust cybersecurity technical standards. These activities are essential to our efforts to advance the security of our current information and communication systems and to build future systems that are more secure from the outset. I would ask at this time, Mr. Speaker, that the remainder of my statement be placed in the record, and simply close by saying thank you to Mr. McCall and to Mr. Lipinski, and I hope that we pass.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Texas.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, does the gentleman from Illinois have any additional speakers?
Just myself to close.
Okay. So yeah,
I'm ready.
You're ready to close. Okay, then I will close as well. I'm sorry. I will yield to you for your closing statement.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Mr. Langevin, the other co-chair of the Cybersecurity Caucus, for all of his work. Thank Ranking Member Johnson for her work, Chairman Hall, especially Mr. McCall for coming together on this bill. As I said, we started this last Congress. Hopefully we will get it finished in this Congress. We know that cyber threats are everywhere, from cyber armies threatening our nation to cyber crime that threatens the financial security of all Americans. This bill addresses 3 key pieces of protecting our nation: improving education, R&D, and development of standards. All of these are key pieces We have to continue to develop as the threats develop, and this will help us to do that. So I want to urge my colleagues to vote for this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois yields back. The gentleman from Texas.
Yeah, let me first, Mr. Speaker,
gentleman's recognized at that time as you may consume.
Yes, thank you. Let me first recognize Mr. Lipinski for his excellent leadership. We've been pushing this bill, the second Congress that we've pushed it. I certainly hope this time it goes to the Senate and gets signed into law. But you've been a real leader on cybersecurity. It's been an honor to serve with you on the Science and Technology Committee together. And just let me again thank you for all of your great efforts. You know, in a time of intense partisanship, where there's so much acrimony on both sides of the aisle, it's refreshing to see a moment when we can come together as Americans first, regardless of party affiliation, and do something that's right. Cybersecurity is in the best interest of the nation. Defending the United States is a fundamental element under the Constitution. And so for me personally, to see us come together like we have today is, again, a very refreshing thing. You know, my father flew in a B-17 over Europe, 35 bombing missions. He was a bombardier. At that time, the state of warfare was very kinetic. They handed down a better country to this generation. But we're faced with a new threat. They're not bombs of his era, of his day, but rather digital bombs that can be dropped at any time, that have dropped on this government, on the federal government, and our private sector. Bombs that have stolen $1 trillion of intellectual property. Bombs that have committed espionage and stolen our military secrets. And bombs that could be conducted in a cyber warfare attack. I think the thing that keeps me up at most of the night, at nighttime, is the idea of cyber warfare. Because we know what our offensive capability is. We know what we can do and conduct as a nation against another nation. That technology in the wrong hands, like a country like Iran, could cause great devastation against the interests of the United States, bring down power grids, bring down financial institutions. Every critical infrastructure tied to the Internet is vulnerable to this type of attack. So I believe that this legislation will protect this nation from such attacks. You know, we all came up here to serve not for ego, not for title, but at the end of the day to make a difference, to make a fundamental difference in the lives of Americans. So I believe a moment like this is a great moment, that we can reflect back later in our lives and think, you know, I made a difference. This bill protects Americans and future generations. And so with that, let me thank all those who have been involved in this critical legislation, and particularly Mr. Lipinski, for your patriotism to this country and what you've done getting this to move forward. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. All time has been yielded back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2096? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. To re-put the question to the House, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2096 as amended? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed and without objection.
Mr. Speaker,
gentleman from Texas.
I request the yeas and the nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 3834 as Advancing America's Networking and Information Technology Research and Development Act of 2012 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 289, H.R. 3834, a bill to amend the High Performance Computing Act of 1991 to authorize activities for support of networking and information technology research and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall, and the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Johnson, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 3834 as amended, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself at such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for what such time as he may consume.
As sponsor of H.R. 3834, the Advancing America's Networking and Information Technology Research and Development Act of 2012, I rise today in strong support of this legislation. Before I delve into the details of the bill, however, I want to thank the Speaker and the Majority Leader for their leadership in putting together a cybersecurity task force to address our serious cybersecurity challenges. This task force, led by Representative Mac Thornberry, provided the compass point and set the direction for all the bills we're considering this week. The Science Committee started our cybersecurity work early in Congress, so I was very pleased to see the task force embrace both Mr. McCall's bill, H.R. 2096, and H.R. 3834 as necessary steps to improve the U.S. cybersecurity. I'd like to also thank my Texas colleague, Ranking Member Johnson, my neighbor, from joining me in co-sponsoring H.R. 3834, which updates the NITR-D program. This program is an important component of our nation's cybersecurity efforts, and it is critical to our overall networking and information technology research and development in general. It's a product of the High Performance Computing Act of 1991 and represents and coordinates the federal government's nearly $4 billion R&D investment in unclassified networking, computing, software, cybersecurity, and related information technologies. The bill before us today updates the underlying high-performance computing statute that's been in place for 20 years and codifies the work National Coordination Office already undertakes. Specifically, H.R. 3834 improves program statistic planning and coordination. It rebalances R&D portfolios to focus less on short-term goals and more on long-scale, long-term interdisciplinary research. It updates research to reflect newer technologies like, quote, big data, unquote, and cyber-physical systems. Also convenes an interagency working group to identify gaps in cloud computing research and examines the potential for using the cloud for federally funded research, and codifies and emphasizes the role of the National Coordination Office. Networking and information technology includes a broad range of technologies from smartphones to cloud computing. These innovations stem from numerous disciplines and have led to advances in search and rescue robots, unmanned aerial vehicles, near real-time weather forecasting, these type devices for assisting living, and computer-based education and training. R&D in this field seeks to minimize and prevent disruptions to critical infrastructure like power grids and emergency communication systems. This essential R&D is part of the reason that the House Republican Cybersecurity Task Force identified this program as important to our nation. Other cybersecurity efforts undertaken by NITR-D agencies include research to detect, prevent, resist, and respond to and recover from actions that compromise or threaten the availability, ingenuity, or security of computer and network basic systems. Currently, 15 federal agencies are contributing members of NITR-D, with an additional 20 or so participating in the program. Coordination among these agencies increases the overall effectiveness and productivity of our nation's networking and information technology and cybersecurity R&D, leverages our strengths avoids duplication, and improves interoperability of R&D products. More importantly, networking and information technology R&D supports and boosts U.S. competitiveness, enhances national security, and helps strengthen the economy through the creation of high-level jobs. H.R. 3834 is a critically sane bill that the House passed twice in the last Congress, only to see it languish in the Senate. I urge passage of this measure and once again and hope that the Senate will act accordingly. As with all the cybersecurity bills before us today, H.R. 3834 enjoys the support of numerous industry supporters and technology stakeholders. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized for such time as she may consume.
I rise in support of H.R. 3834, the Advancing America's Networking and Information Technology Research and Development Act of 2012. H.R. 3834 is a good bipartisan bill, which I was pleased to join Chairman Hall in introducing. It is largely based on the 2009 House-passed bill that was introduced by then-Chairman Gordon and Ranking Member Hall. But the current bill also includes some updates from 2009 bill that appropriately reflect changes to the networking and information technology landscape, as well as policy and management recommendations made by an outside panel of experts charged with evaluating the NITR-D program. The NITR-D program, as it is known, involves a collaboration of 15 federal research and development agencies, each contributing its own unique expertise. To ensure that we make the most effective use of our federal R&D resources and remain a leader in these fields, H.R. 3834 requires that all 15 agencies come together to develop and periodically update a strategic plan for federal investments in NITR-D R&D, or NIT R&D. H.R. 3834 calls for increased support for large-scale, long-term, interdisciplinary research in NIT that will help us tackle national challenges such as improving the effectiveness and efficiency of our healthcare and energy delivery systems. The bill also promotes partnerships between the federal government, academia, and industry to foster technology transfer. In particular, I'd like to highlight this bill's role in ensuring that the education of future NIT workforce remains an important component of the NITR-D program. I am hearing every day from small and large companies alike that the demand for skilled American IT professionals is higher than the supply. We hear this same message from university faculty who tell us that computer science graduates are snatched up the moment they graduate, even while we are in the midst of a recession. This gap between supply and demand exists despite the fact that these jobs are among the highest paying and the most stable jobs out there. It is imperative that we encourage more young Americans to pursue studies in NIT fields. In particular, because of the stark gender and racial gaps we see in computer science programs, it is imperative that we encourage more young women and students of color. I'd like for it to go in addressing these education challenges, but it still sends an important message about the need to educate more of our students in NIT fields and provides the necessary authority for the agencies to play an appropriate role here. Finally, since this is Cyber Week, I would be remiss not to mention that NITR-D program serves as a coordinating and planning umbrella for all unclassified federal cybersecurity R&D. Our committee addressed specific needs in cybersecurity R&D in a separate bill being just considered today. But in doing so, we made sure that both the intellectual and financial resources for cybersecurity R&D are appropriately integrated into the rest of the NIT portfolio. Information security R&D should not take place in its own silo. It bears on all networking and information technologies. In closing, NIT technologies cut across every sector of our economy and our national defense infrastructure. Our relatively modest 20-year investment in NIT programs has contributed immeasurably to our economic and national security by enabling innovation and job creation in NIT and providing American students with the skills to fulfill these jobs. Let's authorize this program today and ensure it remains strong. I want to thank my friend Chairman Hall and his staff, especially Millie Williams, for working so collaboratively and openly with us on this good bipartisan bill. I'd also like to thank my staff, and in particular Delia Sokolow, for their hard work on the bill. And I urge my colleagues to support 3834. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield the gentlelady from Illinois, Mrs. Bigger, 2 minutes.
The gentlelady from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And, Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 3834, also known as the Networking and